February 19, 1945, 09:02 a.m., Green Beach, southeast coast of Iwo Jima. The first wave of the 28th Regiment, 5th Marine Division, did not land on a beach. They landed in a meat grinder. As soon as the rusty ramps of the LVTP-5 amphibious tractors crashed into the water, the air over the island ceased to be transparent. It instantly turned into a solid, vibrating wall of white-hot lead, mortar shrapnel, and volcanic dust. Japanese General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had committed a tactical revolution. He forbade senseless banzai charges and turned this tiny speck of land into the densest defensive network in human history. 800 concrete pillboxes per square mile, all connected by underground tunnels, ventilation shafts, and hidden passages. The platoon of Corporal Tony Stein, a 23-year-old kid from Dayton, Ohio, was pinned to the ground 30 seconds after stepping out of the water. It wasn't earth. It was soft, black volcanic ash. Feet sank into it up to the ankles, making any maneuver agonizingly slow. The Marines resembled flies stuck in tar, while an invisible enemy sprayed them with fire from the commanding height, Mount Suribachi. Chaos defied description. Boys fell before they could even fire a shot. Corpsmen screamed, but their voices drowned in the roar of 320-millimeter Japanese spigot mortars, shells the size of oil drums that left craters 15 feet deep. Standard Marine infantry weapons proved useless. M1 Garand rifles were accurate, but too slow. Bars, Browning automatic rifles, had a magazine of only 20 rounds and a fire rate of 500 rounds per minute. Japanese gunners inside the pillboxes simply waited out the short bar bursts, then opened withering return fire, cutting down Americans while they reloaded. "We need to suppress them! Fire! More fire!" the lieutenant screamed, trying to shout over the roar while pressing his face into the black sand. But Corporal Tony Stein wasn't firing a rifle, and he didn't have a bar. He was holding something that didn't exist in any U.S. Army field manual, something that would have made an ordnance officer in Washington turn gray with horror. It looked like a mad gunsmith's nightmare. A crude, heavy, angular piece of blued metal, over a meter long, with protruding wires, a strange wooden stock, and a canvas belt of ammunition wrapped around Stein's arm like a venomous snake. It was the Stinger, and it was waiting for its moment. But to understand how a single Marine ended up on a beach with a weapon that didn't officially exist, we have to go back 2 weeks. To a scrapyard in Hawaii, Camp Tarawa, Hawaii, February 2nd, 1945, 2 weeks before D-Day. Before the world knew him as the man with the machine gun, Tony Stein was a man with calipers. Back in Dayton, Ohio, Stein had been a professional toolmaker. It wasn't just factory work, it was the elite of the working class. He knew how hardened steel behaved under heat. He knew that if a machine didn't work, you didn't complain, you modified it. Stein knew the infantry lacked fire density. So he went hunting. He found the wreckage of a Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bomber that had crash-landed. Inside the twisted wing sat an AN-M2 .30-06 machine gun. To a grunt, it was scrap. To Stein, it was a revelation. This gun was designed for aerial dogfights. It had a specialized lightened bolt and a recoil booster. The result, 1,350 rounds per minute. 3 times faster than any ground machine gun, 22 bullets per second. Creating the Stinger was only half the battle. Making it work without killing the shooter was the real challenge. And hiding it from officers who threatened court-martial for destruction of government property was a mission worthy of a spy novel. The testing ground Stein chose was at the farthest edge of the base, in an abandoned gravel quarry used for dumping construction waste. It was the only place on the island where the roar of an aviation gun might pass for heavy engineering equipment. The first field test ended in catastrophe. Stein mounted the prototype on an empty wooden ammo crate to check stability. He connected the battery terminals, wrapped in blue electrical tape. Next to him stood Sergeant Mel Greathouse, the only man in the platoon Tony had let in on his insane plan. "Ready?" Greathouse asked, nervously chewing an unlit cigar. "Switching on," Stein replied. He pressed the button. The gun didn't just fire, it went berserk. Without the heavy aircraft mount to absorb vibration, the recoil of 1,350 rounds per minute threw the 45-pound weapon backward with the force of a sledgehammer. The Garand stock Stein had welded on the day before couldn't take the stress. It snapped at the weld with a sickening metal screech and slammed into Tony's chest, knocking him flat. The barrel, losing its pivot, jerked upward, sending the last 10 rounds of the belt into the sky, narrowly missing a passing Corsair patrol plane. Stein lay in the red Hawaiian dust, gasping for air. A massive purple bruise was already spreading under his fatigues. "You alive?" Greathouse leaned over him. Tony spat blood. There was no fear in his eyes, only the anger of an engineer who had miscalculated. "The weld failed," he rasped, standing up. "Recoil vector is too high. We need steel gussets for reinforcement, and I need to angle the stock down 5 degrees. The next 3 nights were engineering hell. Stein didn't sleep. He stole electrodes from Navy welders, bribing them with cigarettes. He traded 3 cans of peaches with the regimental cook for a jar of high-quality soldering flux. He redesigned the stock 3 times until he found the perfect angle where the monstrous recoil would drive straight into the shoulder, not flip the muzzle into the sky. But the main problem wasn't metal. The main problem were lieutenant's bars. On the 4th day, as Stein and Greathouse went out to the quarry for the final test, Lieutenant Bradford, the battalion ordnance officer, found them. He had driven by and heard the sound. A sound you couldn't confuse with a bar or a Browning. It was a sound that belonged in the sky. The jeep skidded into the quarry, kicking up a cloud of dust. The lieutenant jumped out, red with rage, hand on his holster. "Corporal Stein, what in the hell is this?" he screamed over the wind. Tony stood with the smoking Stinger in his hands. In front of him, an old 55-gallon fuel drum, turned into a sieve, was still smoldering. "Experimental modification, sir," Stein replied calmly, lowering the barrel. Bradford walked closer. His eyes went wide as he recognized the parts. An AN-M2 receiver, a Garand stock, bar bipods. "Did you steal an aircraft gun from the scrapyard?" The officer's voice shook with anger. "Do you realize what you've done? This is theft of federal property. This is destruction of government assets. This is a court-martial, Stein. Turn that in to the armory immediately. You're under arrest, pending investigation." This was the moment of truth. If Stein surrendered the weapon, the story of Iwo Jima might have had a bloodier ending for his platoon. Tony slowly disconnected the battery, but didn't hand over the gun. He looked the officer in the eye. "Sir, with all due respect, in 2 weeks we hit Iwo Jima. Intel says concrete bunkers with walls a meter thick. Your standard bar won't touch them. It just scratches the paint. But this thing—" Stein patted the hot cooling jacket. "This thing cuts concrete like butter. Let me show you." Lieutenant Bradford was a hard-nosed stickler, but he wasn't an idiot. He knew what was waiting for them on the beaches. "You have 1 minute, Corporal," he hissed through his teeth. "If that thing jams, explodes, or misses, I will personally strip your stripes and send you to the brig." Stein nodded. He pointed to an old concrete block, once a foundation for a rock crusher, 70 meters away. "See that block, sir? Imagine that's a Japanese pillbox aperture." Tony hoisted the Frankenstein. He didn't go prone. He braced the stock against his hip, legs spread wide like a heavyweight boxer, bracing for a punch. Click of the switch. The air in the quarry tore apart. A 2-foot tongue of muzzle flash erupted. The tracers merged into a single laser beam. The concrete block didn't just take hits, it began to evaporate. In 4 seconds, Stein put 100 rounds of 30-06 into a single point. The kinetic energy was so catastrophic that the concrete crumbled to dust, exposing rusty rebar that was instantly sheared like straw. When the belt ran dry, a ringing silence hung in the quarry, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal and the smell of ozone. The concrete block was a pile of smoking rubble. Lieutenant Bradford slowly took off his cap and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He walked up to Stein, looking at the ugly weapon not as trash, but as a sacred artifact. "How much does it weigh?" he asked quietly. 45 pounds with ammo, sir." "And you're going to hump that? In the sand?" "I'll carry it, sir, and I'll take as much ammo as I can lift. When that runs out, I'll run for more." The officer paused, looking at the smoking barrel, then at Stein. "I didn't see this, Corporal. This conversation never happened. If anyone asks, you found it on the beach after landing. And one more thing. Make 5 more of them, for Greathouse's boys. We're going to need them." The School of Pain. With the unofficial go-ahead, Stein turned his platoon tent into an underground assembly line. He built 5 more Stingers for the toughest, craziest guys in the company. But giving a soldier the weapon wasn't enough. He had to teach them not to die from it. "Listen up, Suicide Squad!" Stein yelled at the impromptu briefing. "This beast has no safety. None. If you short the wires by accident, it fires. If you drop it on the button, it fires and saws your legs off. You are the safety." He taught them how to carry the heavy 24-volt battery so the wires wouldn't fray. He taught them to dance with the machine gun. "Don't fight the recoil," he explained, showing his shoulders, now black and blue. "If you fight it, it knocks you over. You have to lean into it. You have to become the gun mount." Training was brutal. The guys ran on the Hawaiian beach with 50-pound sandbags to simulate the Stinger. They learned to reload blind, lying in the mud. Stein made them strip the mechanism to the last screw, using only a quarter coin as a screwdriver. "There won't be workbenches on Iwo," he screamed. "If it jams, you fix it in a crater, neck deep in shit, while getting shot at." By the time they loaded onto the transport ships, the 6 Stinger operators didn't look like normal Marines. They had burns on their left arms. They had massive calluses on their right hips. They walked with a strange, heavy shuffle, accustomed to balancing the monster. They were ready. When the ramps dropped at Iwo Jima on February 19th, Tony Stein knew everything he had done, stealing parts, sleepless nights, welding burns, led to this moment. The test range was closed. The exam in blood had begun. February 19th, 1945, 09:05 a.m., back on Green Beach. Stein reconnected the battery terminals on his belt. He checked the belt feed. Unlike the bar with its pitiful 20 rounds, Stein had a 100-round belt coiled in a modified 50-caliber ammo box. He stood up. In this hell, where raising your head meant death, he stood up to his full height. The nearest Japanese pillbox was 40 meters away. A heavy Type 92 machine gun was hammering from its aperture, keeping the entire platoon pinned. Stein threw the sling over his shoulder and pressed the button. The sound paralyzed everyone on the beach. It wasn't a rattle. It was a roar. A stream of lead at a density of 22 bullets per second slammed into the aperture. The concrete began to explode in clouds of dust. Bullets flew inside, ricocheting off the walls, turning the interior into a blender. The Japanese gun fell silent instantly, sawed in half along with its crew. Stein didn't stop. He swept fire to a group of Japanese riflemen running between boulders. The tracers drew a fiery arc. 3 enemy soldiers fell, cut in 2. The belt ran dry in 15 seconds. Stein stood in the middle of the beach with a smoking red-hot piece of metal. "I need ammo!" he screamed. But the ammo carrier was dead. The nearest supply dump was at the water's edge, 150 meters behind him. Stein looked at his heavy boots, sinking into the ash. To hell with it, he thought. He sat down, rapidly unlaced his boots, and kicked them off. He threw off his helmet. He threw off his jacket. He was left in his socks and a t-shirt. He ran back toward the sea. Without protection, light, fast. Reaching the landing craft, he grabbed 2 boxes of belts. On the way back up the beach, he saw a wounded Marine, Corporal Johnson, lying with shattered legs, screaming. Stein, already loaded with 50 pounds of ammo, scooped Johnson up with his free arm, threw him over his shoulder, and dragged him to the medics. He dropped off the wounded man, spun around, and ran back into the fight. In his socks, over sharp volcanic rocks. This was the first run. There would be 8 of them that day. Run 3. Duel with a sniper. By 10 a.m., Stein had already made 2 runs. His feet were bleeding, but adrenaline dulled the pain. Returning to position, he faced a new threat. A Japanese sniper was hiding in a spider hole, a camouflage trapdoor, methodically picking off sergeants. Stein couldn't see the sniper, but he saw the general direction, a clump of dry grass that moved slightly. A normal rifleman wouldn't risk a blind shot. Stein did it differently. He used the stinger like a scythe. He pressed the button and simply mowed the entire patch of terrain. Hundreds of bullets plowed the earth to a depth of 2 feet. The sniper fire stopped. When Marines checked the spot later, they found what was left of the shooter and his cover. Shredded. Run 5. Saving the officer. Around noon, the situation on the right flank went critical. A lieutenant commanding the adjacent squad was hit in the chest and lay in the open. 2 corpsmen who tried to reach him were killed. Stein, just returning with another load of ammo and still shoeless, saw this. He had a loaded stinger. He jumped out into the open. "Look at me, you bastards!" he screamed. He opened overwhelming fire from the hip, suppressing 2 enemy positions simultaneously. The Japanese instinctively ducked from the wall of flying lead. Those 3 seconds were enough. Stein, firing one-handed, holding the 40-pound gun by the grip and sling, used his other hand to grab the lieutenant by his webbing and drag him into a crater. He saved the officer, shielded only by the density of his own fire. Run 7. Technical crisis. By 2 p.m., the Stinger began to die. Aircraft guns are cooled by the slipstream of air at high altitude. On the ground, in the tropical heat and continuous fire, the metal began to fail. The barrel glowed cherry red. The jacket hissed. Smoke poured off it. During an assault on another bunker, the gun jammed. Stein pressed the button. Silence. The enemy was 20 meters away. The Japanese, hearing the silence, began to rise to throw grenades. Stein dove behind a rock. Anyone else would have ditched the broken weapon and grabbed a dead man's rifle. But Stein was a toolmaker. He knew his machine. He whipped out his multi-tool. His fingers, blistered from the hot metal, worked with incredible speed. He popped the receiver cover. A casing had swollen in the chamber from the heat. The extractor had ripped the rim off. Stein grabbed a rock and hammered the charging handle, forcing the casing out with brute force. The mechanism clanked shut. He realigned the twisted belt. He tightened the battery terminal that had rattled loose. "We're still in business, baby," he whispered. He popped up from the rock exactly as a Japanese soldier wound up to throw a grenade. The burst tore the grenadier apart. Run 8, the last stand. By evening, the beach was littered with bodies. The water at the shoreline was red. Stein had made 8 runs, each time running to the sea, each time carrying a wounded man back to the boats, each time hauling crates of ammo back to the fight. His socks were long gone. His feet were a raw mass of cuts from the volcanic glass. He was dehydrated, deafened, exhausted beyond human limits. But the battle didn't stop. His platoon had pushed inland, but was cut off. The Japanese launched a counterattack. The Marines were out of ammo. The Stinger was the only thing holding the line. But its life was ending, too. The rifling in the barrel was stripped smooth. The bullets were starting to tumble, keyholing, but at 50 meters, that just made the wounds more horrific. "Fall back," the sergeant ordered. "We'll dig in on the ridge." "I'll hold 'em," Stein replied. He remained alone in a small crater. When the Japanese charged with fixed bayonets, screaming "Banzai!" Stein unleashed the remainder of the belt. It was a wall of fire. He swept the barrel side to side like a fire hose. The last 150 rounds left the gun in 7 seconds. It was enough. The attack broke. The Japanese simply couldn't walk through the rain of lead. When the gun finally fell silent for good, Stein stumbled back to his lines. He carried his Stinger like a child. He didn't leave it behind, even now that it was a useless hunk of melted iron. The toll of day 1. In 24 hours, Corporal Tony Stein, armed with a homemade machine gun, personally destroyed 6 concrete pillboxes, 2 mortar positions, approximately 20 Japanese soldiers in open combat. He saved the lives of a dozen wounded Marines, carrying them to the sea during his ammo runs. His Stinger became a legend. In the following days of the battle, other Marines from the 5th Division tried to copy his invention. We know of at least 5 or 6 similar Frankenstein guns built on Iwo Jima, but none worked as flawlessly as the prototype built by the master toolmaker. Tony continued to fight. He found a rifle, then another machine gun. He didn't go to the rear, despite his shredded feet. March 1st, 1945. Reconnaissance in force near Hill 362A. Stein's platoon came under crossfire. Tony volunteered to spot the machine gunner pinning them down. He popped up to direct tank fire. One shot, a Japanese sniper didn't miss. The bullet hit Stein in the head. He died instantly. He was 24 years old. He didn't see the victory. He didn't see the flag raised over Suribachi. But he was the one who paved the road to that flag through the black ash of Green Beach. A year later, on February 19, 1946, President Truman presented the Medal of Honor to Tony Stein's widow. The citation, usually dry and formal, contained words rarely found in official documents. For unprecedented boldness, technical ingenuity, and personal courage beyond the limits of human endurance. History often misses the fact that there wasn't just one Stinger on Iwo Jima. There were 6. Sergeant Mel Greathouse, Stein's friend, carried one too. He didn't have Tony's engineering talent, but he had the same fury. On the days Stein stormed the beach, Greathouse was holding the flank. Witnesses describe a scene worthy of a movie, but it is a documented fact. Greathouse faced a banzai charge in a narrow ravine. About 40 Japanese soldiers charged. Greathouse didn't have time to reload. He had one belt. He held the trigger down for 4 seconds. The Stinger spat 100 bullets in one burst. The barrel glowed white and bent under its own weight at the end. But when the smoke cleared, the attack ceased to exist. Not a single enemy soldier was left standing. The tragedy of this weapon lies in its fate. After the battle, rear echelon officers ordered the destruction of dangerous unauthorized modifications. 5 of the 6 Stingers were disassembled or thrown into the ocean. The last one, Greathouse's, was sent to Quantico for testing and vanished in 1946. Today, we have 0 surviving examples. All that remains are a few grainy photos of Stein posing with the Frankenstein on Hawaii. To understand the magnitude of Stein's feat, look at the math. War is the mathematics of fire, and Tony Stein found a cheat code. 1. BAR. Fire rate 500 RPM. Problem: the 20-round magazine empties in 2.5 seconds. Reloading takes 4. In that time, you die. 2. The Stinger. Fire rate 1,350 RPM. Effect: a wall of fire that is physically impossible to cross. The secret: the recoil booster on the muzzle used trapping gas to push the barrel back at insane speeds, cocking the spring. Stein took a mechanism designed for the cold sky and brought it to the hot mud. The sound. Veterans recalled the sound paralyzed the Japanese. A normal gun goes tat, tat, tat. The Stinger went brrrt. It sounded like a strafing plane. Japanese soldiers in bunkers thought they were being attacked by aircraft, freezing in terror. Stein's legacy didn't die in the ash. After the war, the Marines analyzed the battle. They needed a squad automatic weapon with belt feed and high power. Engineers remembered the Stinger. The concept: one man carries a belt-fed machine gun with the power of a tripod gun, but the mobility of a rifle. This led to the T-44, then the T-161. In 1957, the U.S. Army adopted the M60 machine gun. The famous pig we saw in Rambo's hands is the direct ideological descendant of the ugly Frankenstein welded in a garage on Hawaii. Tony Stein, without knowing it, defined infantry combat for the next 50 years. Conclusion: Tony Stein wasn't a comic book superhero. He was a guy from a factory. He had calloused hands, a greasy cap, and he knew how to use tools. His story is a hymn to human ingenuity. When the system gave him tools that didn't work, he didn't complain. He went to a scrapyard and built a tool of victory. He ran barefoot on razor blades. And he won. If this story of insane bravery and engineering genius made your heart beat faster, subscribe to the channel right now. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next story about the people who changed history with their bare hands. Comment below: could a modern soldier build a weapon like this in the field today? See you in the next video.